So we haven't really talked about the Munsters. What do you think?
About the show?
Did you like the movie?
I feel silly talking about it in a cerebral way. Yeah, I did. I think. I liked everyone in it. I could say that about, I have said that about all of Rob's movies. I like everyone in them. He gets these great actors and he gets great performances out of them. And this wasn't any exception, I don't think.
Yeah.
It's so weird. You look at it, even though it's like a kid's movie or whatever, it's still, at this point, you know it's a Rob Zombie movie when you're watching it. Which some, and people, his haters will say the same thing. Because, oh, it's shitty, and all his movies are shitty, so this is shitty too. So it's a Rob Zombie movie. But in a more, it looked like one. It felt like one. I expected more.
It felt a little cheap.
It was under budget. He was aware of that more than anyone. But did that help it though? That might have helped it. It's just another one of those things. Like when we were talking about the Beverly Hillbillies. Like, you think this is stupid? Did you watch the show? Fangoria magazine.
One of our favorite things.
I picked a good one. I always pick a good one.
Well, there are very few bad ones.
Well, this is because there's a lot in it. That's usually why I pick it. This one is special to me. There's always a backstory, isn't there? It's okay. So it's only special to me because this issue is from February of 1983. So this was on the newsstands the month I was born, the minute I was born. They're always a bit off, as like maybe this wasn't on the newsstand, maybe it might have been a little bit before or after, like they were ahead of the game, a little behind. But I like to pretend that this is like a piece of the puzzle of my own life. I like that kind of stuff. I like my own history, or I like the history around me of the time I was. Not unlike maybe like the ancestry cult, where people are obsessed with their ancestors. I don't give a shit about that. I don't care about anything. I like stuff that was going on around my time, and if it somehow ties into me, that's interesting to me. But other than when it came out, the issue is very good. The issue I speak of is issue number 25.
It's a good cover.
The cover is great for a lot of reasons. Right off the bat, like Cronenberg was their guy. Like throughout the whole decade, they just he was horror movies to them. They throw Freddy and Jason and everyone else on the cover all the time and talk about them all the time, but they didn't really like any of those people. They liked Cronenberg. Cronenberg was it for them. And so this is a great cover for them. It's also a great cover because, I mean, if you sum up 1983, home video, horror at home, your TV set. It's integral to the movie, but also it sums up what they're about, what home video was about. Just, or same with HBO, like just all of the drive-in stuff, all the grindhouse stuff, everything was now just in your living room on your TV, and here it is on this cover, and it just sums it up. TV with guts. So much so that their sidebar film strip, they moved it to the bottom to accommodate this sort of cool image, No poster inside, but there is a cool ad for.
Is that a head?
It's a mask.
Oh, it's a mask.
ET mask. Pretty good.
That is pretty good.
Usually these masks are not very good. This one's really very good. Dawn Post Studios. So yeah, it would be good. Page 9, article interview with Tom Savini coming off of Creepshow. Nothing too notable in it, just the fact that it's an interview with Tom Savini about Creepshow, and like, again, how do you sum up this magazine? Well, I don't know, an interview with Tom Savini about Creepshow, like right. I mean, it had already come out, but still, like, you know, and it's worth it. And you know him well enough now. You can like hear his voice while he's answering these questions with his sort of rat-a-tat way he talks. Page 13. An article about the movie Scalps.
So it's like Fred Olin Ray? Directed
by Fred Olin Ray. Director / makeup artist Fred Olin Ray. Now, this is 1983, so he's very young at this point. Of course, you know, Fred Olin Ray, one of our wanted to do Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers and Alienator and Evil Tunes and Bikini Drive-In, that level stuff. But apparently, he was a makeup artist prior to that. The credits they give him, or the couple of credits they give him, one of them was Friday the 13th Part 3. So he worked on a Friday the 13th movie. I didn't know that, and I don't know what his contribution was to it. They also credit him to, as it says, the masks for Frankenberry and Count Chocula on TV. I don't know to what that refers, because Frankenberry and Count Chocula commercials in 1983, they were animated.
Yeah.
There was a really horrifying commercial in the 90s where they tried to do a live-action Count Chocula.
If you crave chocolate too, Count Chocula can satisfy the chocolate monster in you.
And it was just awful. But I don't remember them ever being live-action in the 80s. I don't know what they're talking about here. I've also known to not really trust this magazine was rich with typos and inaccuracies back then, and it's always fun to read. And they're simple too, not just like spelling errors, but sometimes like that's not correct. There's even one of the corrections. There's literally a correction in the letters, so where someone wrote in. I guess in a previous issue, they had posted a picture of Heather O'Rourke in Poltergeist and credited it as Drew Barrymore. And so they have this big correction here. It just says Heather O'Rourke, okay? Like that level of error. It was like typical in these, and it's never really frustrating. It's kind of charming. It gives it that sort of pulpiness to it. Like they were serious and they were passionate, but they were also kind of
sloppy.
Yeah, and you know, low budget. And page 17, there's a follow up article that I guess they had done before from the previous one where they're talking about Poltergeist, more about Poltergeist special effects, and page after page of like tedious, meticulous descriptions about how they did like certain effects or a certain effect, like paragraph after paragraph with the makeup people or the effects people, and you're reading it, and after like 1,000 words, you're like, boy, this would be a lot more interesting to watch something about this than reading about it. Like the scene, the first scene where the ghost tried to make contact with her, and that sort of cartoon hand comes out of the TV. Apparently they tried something live action initially. That's what Spielberg wanted. And it spends like, you know, a few thousand words describing what they did and then how they threw it away and they didn't use that. It's like, well, that's interesting, but like... But again, maybe that's, you know, that's like the joy of this, like... Would anyone have the sort of depth to describe like one of these superhero movies, the effects, an effect in one of these superhero movies, to this length of like, oh, we spent days and storyboarding and making casts and running it by this person, seeing if it was good, and then it was kind of good with this lighting, but it wasn't with this lighting, and then our producer didn't like it, but our director really liked it. Do you think they go through that in this crap they do nowadays? Not to pick on the comic book movies again, but just anything. Like, this is the work that's being done. This guy knew everything that went on, and he told it verbatim. Like, yeah, we did this, and this, and this is just what goes on in his mind. And now it's just some grad student who animates, some explosions in the background, and that's his or her job for the summer. Notable difference.
Yeah.
In the quality. Page 21, an interview with Whitley Strieber, the author of the book The Hunger, who they're sort of finishing up shooting it while they're interviewing him, and so he's only read the screenplay, which apparently ended up not being the screenplay that they used, but he's also seen dailies, and he likes all the dailies. The Hunger is director Tony Scott's first feature film assignment. I didn't know it was his first, but there we are. Following an award-winning career in commercials, most frequently seen in his Diet Right cola commercial featuring the "Now You See It, Now You Don't" jingle. The "Now You See It, Now You Don't" jingle is not Diet Right. That was Diet Pepsi.
Yeah. Even I know that.
But then that had me confused. Like, am I wrong? Did I get it wrong? But no, if you look up the Diet Pepsi commercial, the "Now You See It, Now You Don't" Diet Pepsi commercials, you're like, oh my god, like this looks like Days of Thunder.
Now you see it, now you don't. Here you have it, here you won't. Oh, Diet Pepsi, one small calorie. Now you see it, now you don't. That great.
This is clearly a Tony Scott thing, and they're like really good, like some of the best Pepsi commercials that I've ever seen.
Now you see it, now you don't.
And between those commercials and this movie, he had the edge on Ridley for like a minute there, I think. Well, because it's in 1983, so this is a long time after. I'll watch The Hunger again before I watch Blade Runner. Just a blanket statement. I like more Tony movies than Ridley movies.
Yeah, I do too. I do.
Page 26, The Pit in the Pen of Alex Gordon, which is Alex Gordon's column that he did about his he was like a B-movie writer, mostly writer in Hollywood. So he rubbed shoulders with a lot of B-movie people, so he gets his little column. And he spent a lot of time with Ed Wood. And Ed Wood is becoming popular around this time, especially in horror cinema because of video. So his cult of being like the worst director of all time is now growing because people.
So Ed Wood got a lot of rentals?
Ed Wood got a lot of rentals because his notoriety in being so bad that people were renting his movies for fun, and now his cult was growing, and Alex Gordon is here to sort of defend him and point out what everyone is pointing around in these older magazines. Like, well, he wasn't any worse than a lot of the B-movie directors around this time.
I think that he was eccentric.
He was, and that's what makes him fascinating, interesting. And I personally think a lot of his stuff's way, way better than a lot of the crap that was around this time. It was Alex Gordon who actually introduced him to Bela Lugosi. There's a lot of the Ed Wood stuff is romanticized in the movie, obviously. They actually wrote Bride of the Monster together. So he was like he didn't have any. There was no character like him in the Tim Burton movie, but he was more like his wingman for those early days that they depict in the Tim Burton Johnny Depp movie. Didn't really get his credit in that movie, but he was like there for most of this and sort of helped him get started. And this sort of short little essay is interesting to learn about that stuff. He also introduced him to Tor Johnson too. Like,
oh really?
He was there for like all the big milestones that they that work better in the movie, you know, than they did in real life, and that's why it's a biopic, because that's how you do a biopic. You embellish, but you don't. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and they did it very rightly in that movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Page 31, a big article about Forrest J. Ackerman, who was the editor and I believe creator of Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, who then got fired and replaced by some younger guy.
The creator?
The creator, yeah. And then he wrote some, big letter to be published in his last issue, and they didn't publish it.
Oh, that's so sad.
So he came to Fangoria, and Fangoria published it.
Oh, huh.
It was kind of a neat thing that they did, and a big interview with him and explaining, like, I can't believe they did this. It's so sad that they did this to me. Thank God for Fangoria. So that was neat. Interview with Jack Shoulder about how he doesn't like horror movies. That's typical. Page 38. Interview with the son of Svengoolie, who we now know as Svengoolie. But at the time, he was son of Svengoolie, because Svengoolie before him did not look like that. The original Svengoolie was more of a hippie. Hippie, yes.
Boy, that thing gets heavy. There's some heavy. Where? Oh, yes. Listen, the time has come for scary things, like monsters, ghosts, and vampire wings. Like horrible movies, all drippy and drooly. And horrible hosts like me, Bruce Cabot.
And just a local guy in Chicago.
Did he also do?
He did. It was the same deal. He did, hosted horror movies. He went off the air in '73, and then Rich Cause took over as son of Svengoolie in '78.
Hey, Dad, can I borrow the keys to the hearse tonight? Thank you. Good evening. I am the son of Svengoolie.
And is still doing it today on a national thing. In LA during the 50s, horror fans were tantalized by the original Vampira and were then bewitched by Vampira 2. I never knew about a Vampira 2. And just recently have been enticed by Vampira's current modified reincarnation, Elvira. In the much more fashionable Cleveland, the horror host crown was worn by the Manic Ghoulardi in the 60s, and was then handed down to his hand-picked successor, the Ghoul, who reigns to this day. Wasn't aware of the Ghoul either.
Yeah.
A lot of these, what would you call them? Successors, I guess you call them. Not really aware of them, except for son of Svengoolie, because he then became Svengoolie. Still talking about all the same stuff about his one-liners and his rubber chickens, and just doing all the same shit that he just always does. So God bless him. Page 42, interview with Jerome Bixby, who was a science fiction writer, most famous for It, the Terror from Beyond Space from 1958. But he was most proud of his episode of The Twilight Zone, It's a Good Life. The boy with the special powers. Which is funny, because later on in this issue, they do their monster invasion, which is the up-to-the-minute warnings of what's coming your way. Stuff that's coming out soon, one of which is the Twilight Zone movie. is currently nearing completion, as Steven Spielberg wraps up the final segment to be filmed, a sentimental tale based on one of the TV episodes written by George Clayton Johnson. No monsters, contrary to previous reports here and elsewhere. Two things there. One, little did we know how fucking sentimental it was when they said sentimental and no monsters. And it makes you feel sad, because so there were rumors that he might have one with monsters in it, and then you think of what could have been.
I know.
Instead of
what we got.
this
saccharine toothache.
Yeah, it was toothache. That's what I was gonna say. Like this ET cavity that bothers you, like you can't get rid of it. The other the other thing, the Twilight Zone movie is currently nearing completion. How can you say that without talking about no news has come out of this movie as yet, It's nearing completion, which means everything else has been
shot and filmed,
and or scrapped.
Maybe they weren't allowed to talk about it.
Okay. I'll buy that. Yeah.
If it was a legal case, if there was a legal thing going on.
Yeah, there would be a legal. You don't think it would leak that fucking Rob Morrow was dead? You can't keep that under wraps.
Man.
They also promised Dick Miller will be in the Joe Dante segment. Oh, just the beautiful vividness of this next to last page.
Oh, wow. So those are masks?
The actual masks.
Wow.
You feel like it's because it's so culty now that you feel like these masks just come out, but it's funny that they made these for a movie that was such a turkey in terms of critical and box office. That they actually made these is really cool.
Yeah.
On the back is an ad for Wizard video games. Wizard had their own line of video games.
The movie company?
The movie company.
Okay.
Were
they Ataris?
They were Wizard video games.
I don't know what that means.
Yes, they were Ataris. You could play them on the Atari video game system or the Sears Video Arcade. And they had Texas Chainsaw and Halloween. And you've played old video games. You've played Pac-Man before. You've played Donkey Kong before. These were basically Pong with horror movie posters on their boxes. That's how crude they were.
So they didn't look like that.
No, if you could think of the crudest thing possible, like a couple squares and lines, that's what it was.
Okay. And one of the squirrels was supposed to be Michael Myers?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it had the theme song in Beeps and Boops, which, if you think about it, the soundtrack is already Beeps and Boops, isn't it? Page 46. Videodrome. David Cronenberg talks about his latest and most bizarre feature. I'm sure he was so happy to call it his most bizarre feature. I'm sure that was something he said. I'm sure they didn't put that in there. Here's David. There's also a strong sexual element, and there's a cerebral element. People in the movie use a lot of big words. The mix of elements, well, it is strange. It is hard to categorize. Fucking twat.
I don't really have a message that I feel that the world must hear in order to be saved at all. So, to that extent, my films are entertainment in the fullest sense. I mean, I like people to entertain my films rather than my films to entertain them. To entertain the ideas in the film.
You know,
you hate elitism.
Well, no, I don't hate elitists. I kind of like them when they have something to back it up with. I like John Carpenter. I like Stanley Kubrick. I like Nicholas Winding Refn. You want to be a shit, that's fine. But if I like your stuff, then it's kind of there's a charm to it. There's a wit to it. It's funny to me. I don't think I'd want to be their friend. But it's just an extra layer that I find them interesting. Cronenberg doesn't typically go too far above a solid B minus B for me. I will say every time I've seen Videodrome, I've seen it less than 10 times now in my life. But every time I've seen it, it sort of does go up a couple points. It started at like a 75, and now maybe it's like at like an 86. It's like a B, solid B. I like how weird it is. Initially, I just liked the makeup effects, and that was it. And the rest of it was dull, so phony cerebral. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to describe it. I wouldn't say pretentious, because a lot of the best movies of all time are pretentious. It's
pseudo-pretentious.
Pseudo-pretentious?
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
I'm calling it that.
Okay.
I would say that Cronenberg tries to be style and substance, and I don't think it works necessarily.
That's a good point because there's not enough of either.
Yeah.
There's very little of both. Well, actually, wow, that's a good point. There's almost none of either. He has no style. His makeup team has style, for sure, and his composer has style. Who is it typically? Who is it? Howard Shore usually.
Sure. Yeah.
The way the movies are paced, where he puts the camera, that's all just cream of wheat. And his writing is a bit of a snore. I like the stories. I think I like the stories. He has good ideas and good stories.
Yeah.
The dialogue it sounds like microphone feedback a lot of the time.
I fall asleep a lot watching his movies.
Yeah, that's good. They're a bit of a nightlight.
Yeah.
Time when it's when it's scary or gross. Well, that's good on the makeup people, and the performance too. It's amazing that he gets the performances. He gets better performances out of these actors with this dialogue than say George Lucas does when he assembles a lot of great actors and gives them shitty dialogue and isn't able to get a good performance out of them.
He definitely thinks he's better than he is, and acts like
he knows
he
he better. He said that within the past few years how much better he is than Stanley Kubrick ever was, because Kubrick didn't have any heart and soul in his movies, and his movies were all about all have that element of humanity in them. He talks about how much better this movie is than The Thing, than Carpenter's Thing, because the effects in this have a purpose. The effects in the movie are nothing like the stuff in The Thing. It's very different. It's very cerebral. It all has a very definite point and a very definite purpose in the film. Now, that's funny because you talk to Carpenter about something Cronenberg did or somebody else did, and Carpenter will say the same shit. Like, yeah, that movie wasn't any good. Wasn't as good as anything I've done. Like, when he says it, it's cute and it's funny because, like, yeah, you're probably right, John. Yeah, that's, I don't buy it when he does it. The other joke is that the next thing that they keep trying to get him to do is that he wanted to do a Frankenstein movie, and everyone was trying to talk him into do a Frankenstein, David Cronenberg's Frankenstein, and he said, "Well, no, Frankenstein really isn't that interesting anymore because everybody's doing Frankenstein now. Just look at Frankenberry." It all comes back to those fucking cereals, man. What is people's shit with this cereal? It doesn't taste good.
I think Halloween Ends is going to be the best Michael Myers movie of all time.
Okay. I don't get it.
I was just trying to end it funny.
Evil dies this weekend?
At 1:30 on Sunday.
Halloween ends now.